The signal beyond the stars. Commander Ilara Voss stood on the command deck of the Astral Fury, her hands resting lightly on the console in front of her. The ship was silent, almost too silent for the enormity of space that stretched out before her. She had grown accustomed to the hum of machinery and the constant flow of information. But today, something felt off. "Captain Voss, we're receiving an encrypted signal," Lieutenant Caldera reported, his voice tense but calm. "It's coming from the deep fringe of the Tormus expanse. There are human readings, but—" He trailed off, clearly unsettled. Ilara's brow furrowed. The Tormus expanse was known for its navigational hazards, dangerous cosmic anomalies that swallowed entire fleets. It was a place of darkness and uncertainty, and it was far outside the known reaches of human colonies. "Plot the coordinates. Let's see what's out there." She had been in command of the Astral Fury for 3 years, tasked with exploring uncharted regions of space. It had been a routine mission until now. The discovery of a human signal this far out was inexplicable. No human settlements existed beyond the core worlds, and the idea that a distress signal had come from that far out was enough to raise alarms. Within minutes, the crew began to prepare for the journey into the unknown. As the Astral Fury cruised toward the source of the transmission, Ilara's thoughts began to race. Was it a trap? Had someone stumbled into a dangerous part of the galaxy and activated an emergency beacon? Or, perhaps, something more sinister was at play. "Commander, we're approaching the signal's origin," Kale called out, pulling Ilara from her thoughts. "It's a ship. A derelict, drifting, and badly damaged." Ilara's pulse quickened. She stood, moving toward the observation window, her eyes scanning the vastness of space. And there it was, a large, beaten-up vessel, floating silently in the black void. The ship was a mess of crumpled metal and jagged hulls, signs of violent conflict evident on its exterior. The closer they got, the more unsettling the scene became. There was no sign of power, no emissions, just the faint hum of emergency lights flickering weakly. "Run scans," Ilara ordered, her voice firm. She had seen ships like this before, pirates, raiders, or worse. But this one felt different. There was something cold about it, a sense of foreboding in the air. Lieutenant Kale began the scan, his face quickly draining of color. "Commander, this ship, it's human-made. But the biological signatures—" He paused. "They're all children. 35, at least." Ilara's heart stopped. Children. Out here, in the far reaches of space, in a ship like this. Her mind raced. There were no human colonies in this part of the galaxy. No legitimate human presence. So, how had they ended up here? She turned to face her crew, her expression hardening. "We need to board that ship," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Prepare for immediate boarding. Get the medical teams ready." As Ilara and her team suited up for the boarding mission, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on her. What was going on? Who would take children, human children, and send them to the outer edges of space, abandoned and alone? And why? As the Astral Fury hovered near the derelict vessel, Ilara could feel the tension building. Something didn't add up, and she had a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning of a much darker truth. The crew boarded the damaged vessel, moving cautiously through the darkened corridors. The air was stale, and the faint scent of ozone filled their helmets. They followed the scans to the cargo hold, where the life support system was barely functioning. Ilara's breath caught as she approached the first stasis pod. Inside, a young girl, no older than 10, lay suspended in a state of deep hibernation. Her face was pale, her features delicate and innocent, and yet she was surrounded by the cold emptiness of space. Ilara felt her heart twist. This was wrong. This was beyond wrong. "Sir, we found them," Sergeant Milligrantham, the team's medic, said quietly. "The children, they're all in stasis. But these pods don't look like any standard human design." Ilara knelt beside the pod, examining the strange markings that adorned its exterior. They were alien, foreign symbols that she didn't recognize, etched into the metal with precision. And yet, there was something familiar about them, as if they had been deliberately left behind as a warning. "What are they?" Cale asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ilara stood, her fists clenched. "They're a message, a sign. But we're not going to find out what it is by standing here. Let's get them out of here, and fast." But as the crew worked to release the children from their pods, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Someone, or something, had gone to great lengths to keep these children hidden, and she had a feeling they weren't the only ones. The Astral Fury was far from the only ship in the galaxy, and this secret, this crime, was far too big to stay hidden for long. The human race was about to learn a dark truth, and once that truth was out, there would be no turning back. The unraveling mystery. Ilara Voss stood silently in the dimly lit cargo hold of the derelict ship, the stasis pods now open, the children slowly beginning to awaken. The medical team worked feverishly to check their vitals, but Ilara's mind was elsewhere. The symbols on the pods still gnawed at her thoughts. They weren't just random markings. They were a warning. She was certain of it. "Commander," Caldera's voice broke through her thoughts. "We've managed to pull the ship's log from their computer system. It's fragmented, but we've got something." His face was grim, his fingers hovering over his console. "It's not good. According to the last entry, this ship was registered to the Stellar Dominion." The name struck Ilara like a lightning bolt. The Stellar Dominion was an ancient and powerful galactic empire, once considered allies to Earth. They had been instrumental in helping humanity establish its first interstellar colonies, but as the years passed, their true nature had become less clear. They were rumored to be a people who viewed their alliance with Earth as a mere stepping stone to greater control, a tool to expand their vast empire. But this was something else entirely. "The Stellar Dominion," Ilara repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would they have children aboard their ship, and why so far out in the Tormus expanse? Cal's fingers tapped the screen, pulling up a series of encrypted messages. This entry, it's not a coincidence. The children weren't just passengers, they were taken. A cold chill washed over Ilara as the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in her mind. The Stellar Dominion had always kept their distance from Earth in recent years, their motives unclear. But to think that they could be involved in something as grotesque as kidnapping children was beyond anything she had imagined. She turned to the medical team, who were now carefully stabilizing the children. "How long have they been in stasis?" she asked Sergeant Milla Grantham, who was checking a young boy's vitals. Milla glanced at her console. "These pods are unlike anything we've seen before. It's hard to say, but based on their metabolic readings, it seems like they've been in stasis for at least 6 months. Maybe more. Their bodies are showing signs of." Milla hesitated, clearly struggling to put it into words. Signs of prolonged isolation. They'd been cut off from the outside world for a very long time. A silence fell over the room as the weight of her words settled in. These children had been taken from their homes, torn away from the lives they knew, and kept hidden in the cold void of space. Their families, if they even had any left, had no idea where they were or what had happened to them. A feeling of deep anger and helplessness flooded Ilara's chest. Who would do this? She murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. Cale was already moving to the next console, his fingers flying across the screen. "The logs confirm it," he said, his voice rising in intensity. "These children were taken from multiple human colonies. A handful were from colonies in the Beta Quadrant, others from the outskirts of the core worlds. But there's one entry that stands out. It's from a colony called Sundara OX. It was wiped out 6 months ago. The Dominion's last report says they harvested children from the colony before the planet's destruction." Ilara's stomach twisted. The word harvested hung in the air like a heavy fog. its meaning too horrific to fully grasp. The Dominion had destroyed a whole colony of humans, and worse, they had abducted its children. Why? What did they intend to do with them? "Get me that log," Ilara ordered, her voice now sharp and commanding. Now, Kale immediately retrieved the file, displaying the video message on the main screen. The transmission flickered to life, revealing an alien face, an imposing figure with sharp features, gray skin, and piercing red eyes. His voice was cold and calculated as the message began. "This is Transport Ship 542, reporting successful acquisition of Unit 221 and processing Units 376, 491, and 523. The harvested units are being transferred to the processing facility. Planet Sundera X has been terminated. The human population proved uncooperative, but the harvest was successful. Further units are expected for collection. Glory to the Dominion." The transmission cut off, leaving Ilara and her crew in stunned silence. Her mind struggled to process what she had just witnessed. The Dominion had wiped out an entire colony of humans. And for what? To harvest children like they were mere resources to be exploited. A voice broke through the haze of disbelief. "Commander Voss," it was Sergeant Grantham again, her voice low and urgent. "We found something else." Ilara turned to her, her heart pounding. "What is it?" Milla gestured to a small, hidden compartment in the cargo hold, one that hadn't been on any of the scans. She and her team had pried it open, revealing a series of sealed crates. Inside them were human-made artifacts, items clearly from various Earth colonies, personal belongings, family heirlooms, even photographs of people who had once lived on the colonies that had been wiped out. This is what remains of them," Milla said softly. "The families. The people they took." Ilara's heart sank as she approached the crates, pulling out a few of the items. One was a small worn teddy bear. Another, a photograph of a smiling couple and their 2 young children, likely taken before the tragedy that had torn their lives apart. These weren't just lost possessions. They were memories ripped away from families who would never see their loved ones again. "This is far worse than we imagined," Ilara muttered, her voice laced with fury. "The Stellar Dominion didn't just abduct these children. They erased entire colonies from existence." Kel's voice was tense. "Commander, there's more. The last log entry mentions other ships, hundreds of them, and a plan to establish a new supply chain. If this is true, they've been doing this for years." The implications were horrifying. The Stellar Dominion hadn't just wiped out 1 or 2 colonies. They had been systematically abducting humans across the galaxy. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a campaign of terror. And now, the Astral Fury had unwittingly stumbled upon their dark secret. "We need to warn Earth," Ilara said, her voice cold with determination. "We need to bring these children home, and we need to stop this before it spreads further." As she turned to face her crew, she knew one thing for certain. Earth would not take this lying down. The Stellar Dominion had made a grave mistake by underestimating humanity. The hunt for justice would begin now, and it would not stop until every last one of these children was returned to their homes. And more importantly, until the Dominion understood exactly what it meant to face the wrath of humanity, the shadow of vengeance. Ilara Voss stood in the quiet command center of the Astral Fury, staring out at the endless void of space. The children they had rescued were now stabilized and asleep in the medical bay. But the weight of what they had uncovered was a burden that no amount of medical tech could erase. The Stellar Dominion's dark secret was now out, and Earth would need to respond. But how? "Commander," Caldera's voice broke her reverie. "We've received a Priority 1 transmission from Earth Command." Ilara turned to face him, her expression hard. "Put it through." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Admiral Sarah Klein, the commanding officer of Earth's military fleet. Her eyes, though distant, held the same fire Ilara had seen in the eyes of many Earth leaders. "Voss, I've seen the data. Admiral Klein's voice was clipped, but there was a subtle edge of disbelief. "This is beyond anything we've ever encountered. We're mobilizing every fleet to prepare for retaliation, but I need your team's eyes on something crucial." Ilara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "What is it?" Klein's face hardened. "The Dominion has established a network of supply routes. They've been systematically abducting children from Earth colonies, using sleeper ships, mining stations, and even some independent freighters as cover. They're processing these children for purposes unknown, but the reports are consistent. This isn't a simple slave trade. There's something far worse going on." Ilara's hands tightened into fists. "I'll need detailed intel, Admiral. My crew and I will be the ones to track these routes down. No one else." The Admiral nodded, her eyes narrowing. "It's too dangerous. Voss, we don't even know the full scope of their operation. This is their territory. We're entering their home turf." "I understand, Admiral. But if we wait for Earth to mobilize completely, it will be too late. We need to hit them now, before they can erase any more colonies. This is personal now." Ilara's voice was resolute, the weight of her words unshakable. "We'll find out what they're doing with those children, and stop it." Klein paused for a moment, then gave a single nod. "Very well. I'm sending over a list of targets for you to investigate. But make no mistake, Commander, this mission is yours. Do what you must." The transmission ended, leaving a silence that hung heavy in the air. Ilara turned back to the view of space beyond the ship's windows, her mind racing. The Admiral had given them the green light to launch an offensive, but there were far too many unanswered questions. What was the Dominion doing with the children? Was there a larger plan at play? But one thing was clear. Humanity had been pushed to the brink. The Dominion had crossed a line, and Earth wasn't going to forget or forgive. A new mission begins. Days later, the Astral Fury was en route to its first target, a hidden Dominion outpost on the fringe of the Melix Nebula. According to their intelligence, this was one of the main supply hubs for the Dominion's child harvesting network. Ilara stood at the helm, her crew surrounding her as they prepared for their next steps. "Commander, I've got visual on the outpost," Kale called out. His fingers danced across the console. "It's a mining station, but there's something strange about it. No official Dominion insignia, just black markings and a heavy defense grid." Ilara nodded grimly. "No surprise there. They're hiding in plain sight, using their mining operations as a front." "Shall we engage?" asked Mila Grantham, the team's chief medic, her voice steady, but betraying an edge of anticipation. "No," Ilara replied. "We need information first. We approach cautiously. No surprise attacks. This is too big to rush." She paused, thinking about the children they had rescued. They hadn't spoken much, only offering broken snippets of stories, most of them terrified and confused. They knew something terrible had happened, but not the full extent. "Commander," Lieutenant Dax Arlen, the ship's engineer, called out, his voice anxious. "We're picking up multiple energy signatures coming from the outpost. Looks like they're running some kind of heavy machinery, possibly a cloaking field or an energy grid. We'll have to disable it before we land." Ilara said, "If they detect us, this whole mission could go south in an instant." The crew nodded, understanding the stakes. With a deep breath, Ilara issued her final command. "Prepare the boarding party. We need to shut down whatever operations they have running here, rescue any hostages, and gather as much intel as we can. If there are more children here, we take them. No one gets left behind." As the Astral Fury drew closer to the outpost, the crew began to power up their stealth systems. They would have to infiltrate the station without being detected. No easy feat given the presence of Dominion defense grids. But Ilara had no intention of letting them slip away. Not after everything they had done. The air inside the ship grew tense as they docked with the outpost's exterior. Ilara and her team suited up, weapons at the ready. She could feel the heat of determination rising within her. This wasn't just about rescuing children anymore. It was about exposing the Dominion for what they truly were, a race that would destroy anyone who stood in their way, and a threat that humanity could no longer ignore. The dark heart of the Dominion. Inside the mining station, the halls were dimly lit, cold and metallic, with an eerie stillness that made every footstep seem louder than it should be. Ilara's team moved cautiously, their boots echoing softly off the walls. They hadn't encountered resistance yet, but Ilara knew that was just the calm before the storm. "We need to get to the central core and disable their power systems," she whispered, keeping her voice low. "Once we do that, the whole station will go dark. We can move faster after that." Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye. Figures in the shadows. Human figures. "Children," Milla muttered, her voice breaking. A group of children, no older than 10 or 12, were huddled in a corner, shivering in fear. Their eyes were wide with terror, but as Ilara approached, their faces softened in a mix of relief and confusion. "They've been kept here," one of the children said, barely able to speak through the fear. "They came for us, in the night. We didn't know where we were going." Ilara knelt down, her voice soft but fierce. "You're safe now. We're going to get you out of here." But before she could react, the station's security alarms blared to life. The Dominion knew they were here. "We're not leaving without every last one of them," Ilara said, her voice resolute. "Move out." The hunt was on. The siege of shadows. The alarms echoed through the mining station, sharp and unyielding, like the sound of a bell tolling for something far worse than death. Ilara Voss's heart raced as she signaled her team to move quickly. The children they had found were still huddled in the shadows, but now there was no time for comforting them. The Dominion would be on their heels any second. "We need to secure this station, now," Ilara barked, her voice commanding as she grabbed her rifle. "Kale, Milla, gather the children and move them to the lower levels. Dax, start working on the power grid. We need the station to go dark, now." The crew split up without hesitation. Kale and Milla led the children toward the lower levels of the station, while Dax began tapping into the station's security systems, his fingers flying across his console. Ilara glanced at the terminal one last time, her eyes narrowing as the station's layout flickered across the screen. The central core was heavily protected, but with the power down, their advantage would be slim. The Dominion knew the stakes. They wouldn't give up their dark secrets easily. "We'll have to fight our way to the core," Ilara muttered to herself, her eyes scanning the station's internal cameras. There was no turning back now. The Dominion had already sent reinforcements to the docking bays, and the station's corridors were growing warmer with the telltale heat of approaching combat. The heart of the machine. As Ilara moved through the station's dimly lit corridors, the sounds of distant footsteps echoed, drawing closer with every passing second. The entire crew was on high alert. They had no time to be cautious anymore. The only thing that mattered was reaching the central control room and disabling the Dominion's operations. "Commander, I've located the energy hub," Dax's voice crackled through her comm. "I've overridden the security system. I'm diverting all power to the lower sectors, but we need to move fast. The Dominion will notice any second now." Ilara's pulse quickened. If they didn't shut down the station's defenses soon, their cover would be blown completely. She gave her team the order to move forward. "We're on our way, Dax. Don't fail us now." A sudden blast echoed from behind them, followed by the unmistakable sound of a Dominion troop transport arriving. Reinforcements had already landed, and they were closing in. The Astral Fury crew didn't hesitate. Ilara's rifle roared to life as she fired at the shadows, the bolt of energy cutting through the darkness, striking down two of the Dominion soldiers who had tried to ambush them. They'd expected a small resistance, but they hadn't accounted for the relentless determination of humanity. "Stay focused," Ilara said, her voice sharp. "We clear the path and get to that core. We don't leave anyone behind." The firefight intensified as the crew pressed forward, moving through the narrow, winding halls, using their tactical advantage to strike first. With each step, the Dominion's presence grew stronger, but so did their resolve. The walls around them were filled with echoes of blaster fire and the cries of soldiers who realized too late that they had underestimated the humans. "Commander, the power grid is offline," Dax reported, his voice shaky but determined. "I've triggered the station's shutdown. All systems are locked down. We have full access." Ilara nodded, adrenaline pumping through her veins. "Good work, Dax. Now let's finish this." But just as they reached the control room's threshold, a new voice came through the comms, cold and familiar. "Commander Voss." The voice was unmistakable. It was the same voice from the Dominion's earlier transmissions, the one that had overseen the harvesting of Earth's children. "I've been expecting you." Ilara's heart sank. This wasn't just any Dominion officer. This was someone who knew her, someone who had been tracking her crew since their first discovery of the Dominion's dark secret. "Who are you?" Ilara demanded, her grip tightening on her rifle. "What are you doing to these children?" The voice chuckled, a low, guttural sound. "You're too late, human. The Dominion does not take kindly to disobedience. These children were not merely abducted. They are the beginning of a greater plan. You cannot stop what has already begun." Ilara's blood ran cold. This was bigger than just a few stolen children. The Dominion had been preparing for something far more catastrophic, and she had walked right into the heart of their operation. The screen in front of her flickered, and an image of an imposing figure appeared, tall, pale, and dressed in the dark regalia of a Dominion high commander. His eyes were like black voids, unfeeling and detached from the life around him. His name was Varric, a high-ranking official within the Dominion military. "Varric," Ilara growled, feeling the hatred rise in her throat. "Your reign of terror ends here." Varric's lips curled into a twisted smile. "Such defiance. But it will be your last. You will watch as your precious humanity becomes part of the Dominion's legacy." The screen went dark, and the walls seemed to close in. The Dominion soldiers were everywhere now, flooding the corridors in full force. The air was thick with tension as Ilara and her crew moved into the control room, where they would make their stand. The last stand. The doors to the control room slammed open, and the crew charged in, weapons at the ready. Dominion forces were already entrenched, barricading the control panels, preparing for the final push to maintain their grip on the station. But they weren't prepared for the fury of humanity. Ilara's team moved like a well-oiled machine, fighting with the desperation and will to survive that only humanity could summon. The sound of blaster fire, shouts, and the clash of metal filled the air. "Dax, we're counting on you," Ilara shouted as she ducked behind cover and fired at the enemy. Dax's fingers flew across his console, locking down the station's security measures. "Almost there. Just hold them off for a few more seconds." It was now or never. Ilara felt the weight of every decision, every life that had been lost to the Dominion's cruelty, pressing down on her. The last of the Dominion soldiers were being pushed back, but they weren't giving up easily. Varric's shadow loomed over them all, a reminder of the larger war that awaited. "Commander, I've got it," Dax yelled triumphantly. "The system's ours." With a single command, Ilara deactivated the Dominion's last line of defense. The station's power grid flickered and went down, leaving their enemies exposed. The tides had turned. Now, humanity would strike back. But as Varric's face reappeared on the monitor, there was no fear in his expression, only cold amusement. "You think you've won," he sneered. "This is just the beginning. You'll regret ever challenging the Dominion." Ilara's heart burned with determination. "You're wrong, Varric. We are humanity, and we don't back down." The reckoning unfolds. The astral fury shook with the force of their final push. The Dominion's outpost was in chaos, its power systems crippled, and its soldiers scattered or retreating. But Ilara Voss wasn't feeling victorious. Not yet. They had fought hard to get this far. But this was only the beginning. Varek's words, cold and menacing, echoed in her mind. This is just the beginning. As her team regrouped in the control room, the children they had rescued were safe for now, but Ilara knew that their ordeal was far from over. The deeper they delved into the Dominion's operations, the more dangerous their mission became. The truths they had uncovered were like fire. Once lit, they would burn through everything in their path, and there was no way to put it out. "Commander," Dax called out, his voice tense but filled with resolve. "I've accessed the Dominion's ship logs. They were planning a large-scale operation to move the children off-world, to one of their deep space facilities. If we don't stop them, this could happen again. And worse." Ilara's fist slammed onto the console, a flare of anger igniting within her. Where are they taking them? They'd been using a secret fleet of transport ships, all hidden in the outer reaches of Dominion space. They've been collecting children from different colonies, siphoning off populations without anyone noticing. It's a large network, one we could never have anticipated. "Not anymore," Ilara said, her voice low but unyielding. "We will hunt down every one of those ships, and we will burn them to the ground." The search for the hidden fleet. The Astral Fury now set its course toward the outer rim of Dominion space, where intelligence suggested the transport fleet was gathering. Ilara's mind raced with the possibilities. Every ship they destroyed would be one less chance for the Dominion to carry out their plan. But she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something even darker awaited them. "Commander," Kale said, his eyes scanning the holographic map. "We're nearing the edge of the sector. The Dominion fleet is in this area, but it's scattered in smaller clusters, probably to avoid detection. If we can get past their perimeter defenses, we should be able to pick off their ships one by one." Ilara nodded, her gaze fixed on the starry void outside the ship's windows. "That's the plan. But we can't afford to take too long. Every minute we waste is a minute they get closer to executing their operation." The crew, as always, moved with purpose. They knew the stakes. The children, the colonies, humanity's future. They were all at risk. A glimpse of the enemy's heart. As the Astral Fury moved deeper into Dominion territory, the crew encountered their first real obstacle. A Dominion warship, large and menacing, appeared on the radar, a formidable vessel designed for heavy combat. Its shields were raised, and its weapons were primed. It wasn't just guarding the fleet. It was a symbol of the Dominion's power, their will to crush any who opposed them. "We can't take that thing head-on," Kale muttered, eyeing the ship's massive silhouette on the holographic display. "If it detects us, we'll be outgunned and outclassed." Ilara's fingers tapped the arm of her chair in a rhythmic pattern, her thoughts churning. She didn't want a direct confrontation. At least not yet. They were still too far out from the main fleet, and an all-out battle could jeopardize the entire mission. "Dax, any chance we can slip past them undetected?" Ilara asked, her voice sharp. Dax's fingers worked furiously over the ship's controls, his brow furrowed. "It's a long shot, but there is a blind spot in their sensor grid. It's risky, but I can get us in range without triggering an alarm. We'd have to move fast and stay under their radar." Ilara glanced at her team. The risk was high, but the payoff could be monumental. If they could get past this ship, they could begin their assault on the rest of the Dominion fleet, one ship at a time. "Do it," she commanded. "Get us inside their perimeter." The tension in the air was palpable as the Astral Fury engaged its cloaking systems. The ship's exterior shimmered, almost blending into the fabric of space itself. It was a test of nerve, patience, and precision. Every crew member held their breath as they inched closer to the enemy warship. They were almost within striking distance when a voice crackled over the comms, sharp and cold, like a blade. "Commander Voss," Varek's voice sent a chill down her spine. "You should have stayed out of Dominion space, human. You've dug too deep. There's no escape for you now." Ilara's heart raced, But she didn't flinch. "You don't scare me, Varric. Your reign ends now." The screen flickered, and the hologram of Varric appeared once again, his expression unreadable. "You may think you've uncovered everything, but you don't know the full truth. The children, they're only the beginning of what the Dominion has planned. The harvest, the processing, and what comes after, it will change everything." Ilara's mind reeled, trying to understand the implications. What could be worse than the trafficking of children? What was the Dominion preparing for? "You won't succeed," Ilara said, her voice hardening with every word. "We're coming for you, and we will stop whatever twisted plans you've set into motion." Varric's lips curled into a smile, one that lacked any warmth. "We'll see about that. You'll soon learn that humanity is nothing against the might of the Dominion." The transmission cut off, leaving the crew in uneasy silence. Ilara's eyes narrowed. She had always known that the Dominion was ruthless, but the implications of Varric's words were far worse than she had feared. There was something far darker beneath the surface, something that had been hidden, even from them. A new battlefront. The astral fury continued its advance through the outer rim of Dominion space, skirting past patrols and avoiding detection. But Ilara knew they couldn't keep this up forever. The Dominion would eventually discover their presence, and when they did, all hell would break loose. "Commander," Dax called from his station. "I found something strange. There's a signal in the coordinates we've been tracking. It's not like the other Dominion ships. Its energy signature is irregular." "Are you sure?" Ilara asked, her curiosity piqued. "Unsure," Dax replied, his fingers flying across the console. "It's coming from a deep space facility, far beyond what we've mapped so far. It's not even marked in Dominion records." "Could it be another secret project?" Kale suggested. "I think so," Dax said. "It could be their true base of operations, the heart of the Dominion's plans." Ilara's mind raced. Whatever was happening at that facility, it was critical to their mission. If they could uncover it, they might finally understand the full extent of the Dominion's dark ambitions. "Set course for that facility," Ilara ordered. This could be it, the heart of the storm. As the astral fury powered forward, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they were headed into something far more dangerous than they could possibly imagine. Whatever secrets lay hidden at that deep space facility, they would have to be ready for anything. The reckoning was coming, and humanity would fight until the very end. The heart of the Dominion. The deep space facility loomed ahead, like a dark wound in the fabric of the universe. The astral fury drifted closer, its cloaking systems engaged, but Ilara Voss felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. This wasn't just another battle. This was where everything would change. As they approached the facility, Dax's voice came over the comms, tinged with disbelief. "Commander, this isn't just a facility. It's massive, more like a hidden city. I'm seeing thousands of energy signatures, and they're all clustered around a central core. There's something off about this place. The readings are unusual." Ilara's gaze hardened. "What do you mean, unusual?" "I'm not sure," Dax replied, his fingers flying across his console. "It's as if they've been conducting experiments here, something biological. The energy is erratic, almost like it's being siphoned off, but I can't get a clear reading. We're walking into something big." Kale, standing next to Ilara, frowned. "You think it's a trap?" "I think we're about to find out." Ilara's voice was steady, but her heart raced. The Dominion had always been ruthless, but this felt like a deeper, more insidious purpose. Whatever they had been hiding on this station was no longer just about conquest or power. It was personal. The silent sentinel, the astral fury, slipped through the edges of the station's perimeter, avoiding the security drones patrolling the vast expanse. It was eerily quiet, the silence of space broken only by the faint hum of the ship's systems. No alarms, no sudden bursts of energy, but that didn't mean they were safe. Ilara's crew moved into position, taking up their places around the command table. The tension in the air was palpable. Every mission so far had been a step forward in their war against the Dominion. But this felt different. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting to uncover a truth that could change everything. Dax tapped a few keys on the control panel, and a holographic map of the facility appeared, glowing faintly in the dimly lit room. "There's a central tower," he said. "It's the largest structure, and all the power seems to be funneled there. If we disable it, we could cut off the facility's energy. That might give us the edge we need to break through." Ilara nodded. "Then that's where we're going. Everyone else, prepare for a firefight. We can't afford to take it easy just because we're behind enemy lines." As they moved toward the docking bay, Ilara's mind was filled with 1,000 questions. What was the Dominion doing here? Why had they gone to such lengths to hide this place from prying eyes? The very fact that this facility was hidden from the rest of Dominion space suggested something far darker than even she had imagined. Then, as they entered the airlock, a sudden shiver ran down her spine. "Commander," Kel whispered, his voice low, "I'm getting a strange signal. It's coming from inside the tower. It's human." The lost children. The team moved swiftly through the station, sticking to the shadows. Every step felt like an eternity. The air in the facility was thick with an unfamiliar chill, as though something unnatural permeated the very walls. The silence was oppressive, as if the station itself was holding its breath, waiting. As they reached the central tower's entrance, Ilara paused. She could feel the weight of what was about to happen. Whatever secrets the Dominion had hidden here, they would soon be exposed, and humanity would never go back to the way things were. "We're in," Dax said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I've unlocked the access to the tower's core, but you won't believe what I'm seeing." Ilara raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "Humans. There are children, hundreds of them. They're hooked up to these strange machines. They're unconscious, suspended in some kind of fluid. This isn't just a facility for storing children. It's a lab. They've been experimenting on them." Ilara's blood ran cold. She had seen cruelty before, but this was different. This was beyond anything the Dominion had ever done. The children weren't just abducted. They had been used as test subjects, treated as little more than cattle for some twisted purpose. "Can you get any more specifics?" Ilara asked, her voice steady despite the rising fury inside her. Dax nodded, his eyes wide as he scanned the data. "These kids, they're not just victims. Their biological data has been altered, genetically enhanced, augmented. It's as if they've been preparing them for something horrible. They're creating a new kind of soldier or weapon from our own people." Kel's fists clenched. "They've been experimenting with our children to build an army." "That's not all," Dax continued. "There's more. The station's mainframe is linked to an even larger research hub, somewhere further out in Dominion space. The data here is just a small part of a much larger operation, the sinister purpose." As the crew advanced deeper into the facility, the horrors they uncovered only grew darker. Rows upon rows of stasis chambers lined the walls, filled with unconscious children. Their faces were pale, their bodies suspended in the strange fluid, their eyes closed in a state of deep sedation. Ilara's heart twisted with each step she took. She had seen the Dominion's cruelty before, but nothing had prepared her for this. Nothing could. "There must be hundreds of them," Milla said, her voice trembling with disgust. "What could they possibly be doing with all these kids?" "They're breeding an army," Kale said, his voice dark with anger. "An army of human soldiers, manipulated, genetically enhanced, and conditioned to obey." Ilara's mind reeled. This was the Dominion's real plan, not just taking over planets, but creating an army of human soldiers, twisted and broken in ways unimaginable. These children had been born into a nightmare that would never end unless they stopped it. But there was more. As Ilara and her team made their way to the heart of the facility, they stumbled upon something far more disturbing. a massive chamber filled with machines. They were connected to every child on the station, their bodies hooked up to elaborate biomachinery that seemed to be extracting something from them. Something vital, something essential. Are they draining them? Milla whispered, horror in her voice. Dax ran a diagnostic on the machines, his face paling as he processed the information. They're siphoning their life energy, something like a biofusion process. It's almost like they're harvesting the essence of these children, using it to power whatever's at the core of this facility. That's unspeakable, Ilara muttered, her stomach churning. The final decision. As they approached the central core of the facility, Ilara felt a sense of urgency build inside her. This wasn't just a mission anymore. This was a fight for the soul of humanity. Commander, Kale said, his voice low and serious, we need to destroy this place. Now. If we don't, they'll just rebuild it. And this will happen all over again. Ilara nodded, her jaw tight with determination. You're right. We can't let the Dominion continue with this. But just as they prepared to initiate the destruction of the facility's core, a chilling voice echoed through the station speakers. You can't stop it, Commander. You can't stop what's already begun. It was Varek. This is bigger than you, bigger than humanity. You cannot hope to undo the legacy we've already set in motion.